On today's show, did the Cavs get the steal of the draft? We're going to talk about their two picks on day 2 of the 2025 NBA draft on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everybody, my name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. Thank you for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen, and thank you for making it your first listen every single day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. If you're watching on YouTube too, hit us a thumbs up button, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything from Locked On Cavs, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That is code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Joined today by Spencer Davies of Cleveland Cavaliers on SI to talk about day 2 of the NBA draft. The 2025 draft is complete. The Cavs had no picks in the first round, but they did have 2 picks in the second round, and they made both of them. And Spencer, I think with the 49th overall pick, selecting Tyrese Proctor out of Duke, the Cavs might be one of the winners somehow of this draft.
That can be said, just because if you think about it, 2-3 years ago, you get a 5-star high school player who's really in the spotlight and then ends up going to obviously one of the most heralded universities in the entire nation at Duke, and everybody knows how prestigious that place is, you know, with the lure of a Coach K, and then obviously John Shire taking things over and really putting that program right back on top after that. So for him to be around that kind of talent, and something I think that gets glossed over a little bit with Tyrese Proctor is his entire starting 5, his teammates were all drafted tonight in the NBA draft. And yesterday, I should say. So over the 2-day course, and I will say that 3 of them were taken in the first round, 2 of which were in the top 5. You obviously had Cooper Flagg going number 1 overall to the Mavericks, Con Kneppel over in Charlotte, and then you also had Leah McNeely going to the Charlotte Hornets via trade. And then on day 2, Sion James gets drafted as well by the Hornets. So that is not anything to gloss over. That's a big-time thing to really bring a guy in that has played with winners. And I think that that's what really attracted the Cavs to Tyrese Proctor. And I'm not going to sit up here and act like I'm some, a draft analyst that knows Tyrese Proctor's game left from right. But I will say this, I've covered a lot of the league coming from the NBA Global Academy, a lot of the Australian talent coming from the NBA Global Academy over in Canberra. And there is an influx of talent coming over from the motherland. So I'm really excited to see how he fits into here. Obviously, no shortage of Australian talent that's come through with the Cavaliers, as we know. Matthew Dellavedova, Luke Travers on a 2-way contract, and he was a stash a couple years ago. And they've had a bunch of guys come over from there and really have done some good, solid things.
So we obviously don't know what Proctor is going to be as an NBA player. And for a guy who goes 49 overall, like that is never going to be a spot where you're expecting a lot of success. Like I'm writing in my Substack that essentially the lottery, I think, can kind of be viewed as a coin flip in the NBA. Like it's just, there are very few sure things in this draft and in any draft, not this year specifically, but I mean the NBA as a whole. And the second round is just a total complete crapshoot. But for the Cavs to get Proctor at 49 feels like just such a big win for them, because if you go look at everyone's big boards and their mock drafts, like Proctor is a guy who was consistently going higher than this. I don't want to say that this was like the bottom end of where he could be, of where he was projected, because I didn't see anybody that had him falling to the Cavs at number 49. Like every mock draft I looked at had him going in the 30s essentially. But I thought it was really interesting the way that this was navigated. So what I heard from a couple of different sources on Thursday night was that Proctor's group, his representation, was telling teams to not draft him, that he wanted to end up in Cleveland. And of course, This has obviously been worked out because Proctor will be getting a standard contract with the Cavs. He's going to be on the 15-man roster. He's not getting a two-way. He's going to have, a real NBA contract, which at number 49 overall is far from a given in today's day and age. You often don't see those guys. I mean, think back a couple of years. I believe Amani Bates was drafted 48th overall. I know it was in this same ballpark, and he's been on a two-way contract for 2 years, where Proctor's got a guaranteed contract that he's going to sign. He's going to be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm sure he will play at times with the Charge, but he's going to be on the big league club next year. So the way they navigated this, I think you have to, even if Proctor doesn't work out, and listen, you and I have no idea how good he's going to be or not going to be in the NBA. But even if he doesn't work out, I think you have to give Kobe Altman and this Cavs front office some real praise for essentially being able to get their guy at a position where he shouldn't have been available because of the way they were able to navigate this process.
I think you got to give them a lot of credit too, to be able to get somebody they view as an NBA rotational player at the 49th overall selection and legitimately be in that top 15 is not something you see a lot. You just mentioned it, like Amani Bates has not cracked the big club yet, and he'll be going into his third season as a pro here, coming up in the summertime and in the offseason. Luke Travers got taken a few years ago, and he still had been climbing up and still is on that two-way last year. We'll see what happens with those two-way contracts. We only know that Naquan Tomlin is a part of the team. The other two spots are still kind of up for grabs. But they clearly view Tyrese Proctor as somebody who has that kind of upside. And Gansey mentioned it in his press conference when we were talking to him about how they like guys who still have room to grow but have upside already coming in. So he's kind of in that middle ground. He's 21 years old, so he's not completely like huge project, have to develop everything, go back to the basics. It's more or less about kind of working his game in a little bit more and trying to improve his craft more than it is trying to completely get him to understand the game. And I think that that's really attractive to a team at that position. And look, 40% shooter from beyond the arc this past season. And he's somebody who's able to play on and off the ball, more a little off the ball this year than he had been in the couple of years before that. So he'll obviously have to get used to playing off the ball with a team like the Cavs, where we know that he's probably not going to be that, top option. But when you can shoot the ball the way that Tyrese has, it's obviously a plus for this team. And he's got a little size to him too, 6'5". Believe that Gansey said he added 10 to 11 pounds. And did well in his workout. So that's what you have.
Yeah, and I do think, too, knowing the limited stuff that I know about him as a prospect, because I'm not going to sit here and act as if I've watched a ton of Tyrese Proctor film, partially because I thought there's no way this guy's going to make it to the Cavs, and partially because I don't watch a lot of college basketball. I spend my winters watching NBA games every night. But I do think from everything I've read and everything I've seen, the fact that he played multiple roles at Duke, like when he got there, as a freshman, he was much more of an on-ball guy. And then as time went on, for one reason or another, and we can certainly discuss whether or not this is actually a good thing that this happened this way, but he started to play a little bit more off the ball. The one thing that I do think is the most attractive to the Cavs, and Mike Gansey brought this up when he spoke with us a little bit ago, and the thing that stands out to me, too, as you navigate just going to his basketball reference page, it's okay, well, from three-point range as a freshman, he shot 32%. The next year, from three-point range, he shot 35%. This past season, his final season at Duke, he shot 40%. So it's not just, Spencer, that he shot 40% from three. Like you hear that number, you think, oh, that's really good. But it's that he was able to progress and get better, and that you could see just by looking at his raw numbers, you can see, okay, this guy is getting better. This guy is growing as a player. There is a progression happening here. So I do think that's a good thing. And then the one other thing, too, that I think the age is really a benefit here is I don't know what's going to happen with Ty Jerome. I probably think more so, and it has nothing to do with this pick, just some other stuff I've heard. I probably think more so at this point he's not going to be back with the Cavs than maybe I have earlier this offseason. I think there's a better chance he leaves than stays at this point. But I think having somebody that has a higher ceiling, that comes in with a little bit more seasoning, that is a little bit, he's not a one and done guy. He's not still growing into his body, although he will physically continue to mature and develop, but he's not somebody that really, really needs to be shown the ropes. Like, I do think when you're drafting in the second round, if you can find a guy that maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling in the world, but does have a little bit of a higher floor, that's something that I think could be beneficial, and that's where the Cavs are at with this pick.
And something, too, that I was thinking about when looking at Tyrese's kind of stats, just plain view, was seeing how his roles did change, as you just mentioned. Kind of reminds me of Jalen Tyson a little bit, right? Because Jalen had to be that kind of, all right, all the offensive loads on you at Cal in your last year, but sometimes before that you were a little off ball, and you've had to go through different scenarios and different situations. You always have to be prepared for that at the NBA level, because most of the time you're not going to have the ball in your hands as much as you're used to as one of those highly rated prospects in high school. And then obviously getting to the next level, you're going to have to figure your way out a little bit. That's what you do at the pro level. And you mentioned it, being 21 years old, having gone through that stuff a little bit at Duke, playing with elite level talent at Duke, that's going to be beneficial to him. And for me too, I think defensively it's going to be an interesting thing to watch, because you just said it, his frame still isn't quite as big as you would like it to be for his size and for his position, but he is tall, he is long, and he can shoot the three. So for where they got him, I don't think there should be any kind of complaints. What I am curious of your opinion on, though, and somebody brought this up to me on social media, is...
Oh, they're always right over there.
They're always right. But I thought this actually was a good point. How do you feel, though, if you're Luke Travers and you're Imani Bates and you see a guy drafted around that area get a contract and be on your team already at the big club, while you, on the other hand, have been working your butt off in the G League?
That is an interesting question. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to answer that right after this, right here on Locked On Cavs. Let's talk about my underwear, because today's show is brought to you by Skims. I'm wearing it right now, and I am incredibly comfortable right now because I'm wearing Skims for men. They make the best underwear. When I heard that they were making men's underwear, I'm like, really, how's that going to go? Is that going to be an actual thing? Is this a publicity stunt? I didn't know what to make of it. And then they sent me some, and I put it on, and now it's the only underwear that I want to wear, because it's the most comfortable underwear that I've ever worn. I have pretty consistently throughout my life stuck with the same style of underwear, but I've worn a lot of different brands. Some of them have been comfy, some of them have been brutal, and those brands have not lasted very long. But I can tell you that there's not been a brand of underwear that I've worn that has been as comfortable as Skims for Men's. It keeps its shape, it's breathable, it's a very, very comfortable material. It feels like you are wearing luxury. I guess that's the best way I can put it, because I will tell you it's the best underwear I've ever worn, but I feel like I am just wearing luxury in the form of my underwear. And I don't know that you ever want to go through a day where you don't feel like that, because it's one of the best feelings there is. I think you should want to feel luxurious with your underwear, and Skims is the way to do it. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That is skims.com. Again, Skims Men's at skims.com. And let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, check them out at skims.com. That is skims.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work, of taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the very best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. And at Epicor, the All-Stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things that we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions, they'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way, because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier takes the lead. Discover your success at easierwithepicor.com. That is easierwithepicor.com. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And Spencer, to your question about how those guys on two-way should feel, part of it is like, I get it. You know, they probably feel as if they've done their time, so to speak. But I also do think that you have to look at this and say the Cavs are not in the business of making sure everyone's feelings are good, right? Like, what's the goal for the Cavs? It is to win the NBA championship in 2026. Their goal is that 12 months from right now, you and I are doing a podcast about a parade. Now, they don't actually care about that, but they care about having the parade. They don't care about our podcast about it, but they care that they have a parade. That's the goal. So does having those guys, what is more beneficial to them winning the title next year? Is it having Tyrese Proctor on the roster, or is it giving Emoni Bates a standard contract? Like, I think it's a very clear answer here. And I was somebody that I was high on Emoni Bates when the Cavs picked him at number 48 or whatever it was a couple of years ago. I thought, okay, this is a guy that might not work out, but I love the swing. Like, the thought process behind the pick was great, because I looked at him as a guy that had pretty high upside, a lot of very raw tools, and somebody that had a very strong pedigree, like much like Proctor, a former 5-star prospect coming out of high school. Of course, Emoni was a much more highly touted prospect than Proctor. I believe he was a unanimous top 5 prospect by all of the recruiting rankings, but he's not developed that way. He has not turned into what everyone thought that he could. And we don't know what Tyrese Proctor is going to be. But I also look at this and say, okay, where would Emoni Bates have gone had the Cavs not picked him? Where would Luke Travers have gone had the Cavs not picked him? I think had the Cavs not sort of struck this deal with Proctor beforehand, because I think it's very clear that's what happened. Had they not struck this deal with him and had his representation not told teams, hey, don't pick me, he would have gone before 49. Like, he is somebody that I was looking at a lot of the player rankings, a lot of the big boards. Like, the Ringer had him at number 33 overall. He was a top 40 player on every big board that I could find, I believe. Those guys weren't like that. Like, it's for me, he's a second round pick, and at the very best, it's a coin flip whether or not he's good. But I also look at this and say, okay, the Cavs, this is maybe the most valuable second round pick, or like the most value for a second round pick that the Cavs have gotten in quite some time. Like, you just don't get guys like this at number 49, I don't think.
No, that's really rare to, again, get someone who's on a Final Four team that's as highly touted of a prospect as he was early in his career, or earlier in his amateur career, I should say, and gets there. I do want to make one little correction, by the way. I remembered this as soon as I said it, but I never put it back into words. Liam McNeely was not on Duke. That's my bad. It was Common Mawak, who was taken, obviously, number 10, and is going to Phoenix to be with another Dookie, Mark Williams. But that's beside the point. Again, still played with 4 NBA draft picks. 3 of them were in the top 10, and another one got taken early in the second round. But with Tyrese, yeah, I think for them to be able to acquire a talent who they don't have to handle with kid gloves is really, really nice. And you don't have to worry about that extra development piece. But you can still put him to work, and you can still hopefully depend on him. I think another thing that we haven't highlighted yet about Tyrese, and what Gansey kept saying, I think he said it 3 or 4 times when we talked, was you can never have enough ball handlers. And yes, I think that showed a lot in the postseason.
So as you look at this pick, who, if anybody, that is currently on the Cavs roster, and we will include Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill in this discussion because they technically are under contract for 3 more days. Like, they are still members of the Cavs until free agency actually opens up on Monday. So as you look at this roster, who do you think this pick affects?
I don't think.
Like, does this pick say something about anybody else?
I think they have a lot of belief in Craig Porter Jr., so I don't think that is necessarily something that they view as him being replaced. I think it's going to be really important what happens in Summer League, when what Tyrese shows and what maybe Jalen Tyson shows. The two-way guys that were last year, if they're on the team, we'll see who's on the roster. But I don't think somebody on the roster currently who is in a rotation or on the cusp of a rotation should be worried about somebody who is 49th overall in the draft, personally. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think that's the right way to look at it. I look at this as, I don't know if Ty Jerome's going to be back this year. I would guess that he's not. But if he is, and the looming financial crunch that will be coming for the Cavs, because it's going to come, the apron's going to come for them the same way that it just came for Boston. Like that, at some point, they're going to have to cut costs. So let's say they do sign Ty Jerome to a contract extension. Let's say they're able to land him on a deal and he's back in Cleveland next year. I think the likelihood of him finishing said deal in Cleveland is pretty low. Just like I don't think Jarrett Allen, I don't know if he's going to be back next year. He could be somebody that gets traded. But he signed that extension last August, and I think the likelihood of him finishing that extension in Cleveland is pretty low. At some point, I think those two guys, obviously Ty might not be back at all, but at some point those guys might be traded. So I think the strategy here, part of it at least, is at some point we're going to need a third guard. And we don't know if Craig Porter can do it. We know that we can't keep Ty Jerome and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell all together forever. Like, that's just not a feasible thing financially. So enter Tyrese Proctor. I think a really good goal for him is that maybe next year he's the third guard on this team.
Yeah, it's almost like an insurance policy, right? At least in year one for Tyrese, like just being that kind of in case of emergency break glass, and that's how it should be for a rookie coming into a team that just finished top of the Eastern Conference and had 64 wins and all these breaking records and stuff like that. You've got to earn your keep. You got to earn your place to be in the rotation on a team like that. And I'm actually kind of interested to see how Craig Porter Jr. and Jalen Tyson get into this rotation, depending on what happens with Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. Because I think those are the first two guys that come to mind being elevated, depending on what happens with those guys in the free agency. But I would say Tyrese would be below them, at least looking at surface level right now after the draft. I'm like, number 49 overall pick. I don't see you playing much in year one. You could impress in Summer League. Maybe training camp, you stand out. But you're kind of lower on the totem pole. And it just is what it is in the NBA that way. But if he's got that same work ethic they keep talking about, then I'm not going to put any kind of cap on him. Like, if he can do it, he can do it. And, more power to him. But Craig Porter Jr. has been busting his butt for 2 years. And this is his time now to get an opportunity and get to get consistent opportunities. Jalen Tyson worked his butt off last year and kind of got cut off a little bit when DeAndre Hunter got traded for, because he was kind of playing those minutes at the wing and filling in when Dean Wade was hurt and stuff like that. So I think those two just kind of have that grandfathered in rule over a guy like Tyrese Proctor at this moment.
Well, Proctor wasn't the only guy the Cavs picked. They also took somebody else with the 58th overall pick. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about a guy who is not going to play for the Cavs next year, but they drafted. We'll do that next right here on Locked on Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided last minute, maybe it's a Friday night during the summer, you don't have plans, which, hey, this could all be tonight, by the way. And you want to head to a ball game with friends, family. Maybe you have a buddy in town. Maybe you just want to go by yourself, go catch some baseball. Well, you can do that because you realize you want to be in the stands. That's how Game Time can help you. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress that you might think comes along with trying to get your butt in the door at the very last minute. And with the money that you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even maybe say, I got your ticket. Come on with me. I'm buying tonight. Game Time makes all that and so much more possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first watch or listen. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button for us as we roll along, continuing to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers and their draft with the number 58 overall pick. They took, and I hope I say this right, Saliou Niang, not related to George to my knowledge. There were a lot of, when I tweeted out the pick, there were a lot of people that are like, is this just George again? This is not George again. He is not expected, Spencer, to be with the Cavs this year. General Manager Mike Yancey said at his post-draft press conference that the hope is that Niang will be able to play summer league with the Cavs, but I think that Niang is a very raw prospect that is, Yancey mentioned at least 1 year. I think this is probably going to be a 2 to 3 year stash if he does make it over.
At the very least. And you look at like Khalifa Diop, by the way, is still kind of over there doing his thing in Spain. And they took him 2 years ago, I think it was. And we haven't heard really much anything about Khalifa coming over here. And, you know, in the need of a big, you think that you would hear something about that maybe. But they don't want to bring these guys over until they're ready. And that's just how the stashing process works. Let's not bury the lead here, by the way, Mr. Cunningham, because a certain someone broke that pick today. So congratulations, sir.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
That was you. But you know, things that kind of popped out to me in listening to Gansey, it's the length, the athleticism, needs to improve the outside shot, seems to be the number one priority for him. But cutting, slashing, and defending, you know, being that kind of guy that can really disrupt. And, you know, more power to the Cavs for getting a guy like that. I know that everyone clamors for wings over here. Unfortunately, this is not a, you know, copy-paste situation with the current squad. But
Right.
you have one in the pipeline. So, I can't say anything that I know anything about Saliou Niang, but in watching the 2 minutes of highlights that I saw, it just seems like he's rail thin. He's able to kind of navigate the paint pretty well off the ball, and we'll see what happens with that jump shot. But going to be playing for Virtus Bologna next year, and we'll see how things go with that.
So the thing that stands out, because the jump shot is like, if that doesn't come along, he's not going to end up being an NBA player like that. I think it's the truth. It's the thing you have to say. But a lot of what you said really does make me think. Like, you bring up the slashing, the cutting, all those types of things. What does that sound like? That to me sounds like exactly what Kenny Atkinson wants in his offense, right? Like, that is what, and the shooting has to be there, or he's not going to be able to be on the floor. And I'm not saying that he has to turn himself into a 40% three-point shooter. That's a too tall of an ask. But he needs to be a competent three-point shooter to be on the floor. But the slashing, the cutting, the defense, like, those are the things that I think Kenny Atkinson really looks for. And we have no idea. And I think that the chances are better that he doesn't amount to anything than he becomes a rotation player at some point, because this was the second to last pick in the draft. Those guys don't often pan out. But I do like this as an upside bet on a guy with very, very raw traits and tools. And maybe he pans out, maybe he doesn't. But this is sort of the bet that you can take. Okay, well, if it doesn't work, what'd you really lose? The 58th pick, not that big of a deal.
Overseas draft rights. It's a thing. It's a tale as old as time when it comes to NBA teams. And every once in a while, you find a diamond in the rough. And the Cavs organization is good at finding those diamonds, as we've seen. Even if you look at the undrafted track records, the Sam Merrills of the world, Dean Wade, those guys started, G League and had to make their way up. And, in Dean Wade's case, like just undrafted to Exhibit 10 to two-way to all the way to a big-time contract. And now he's a rotational player. I don't know if it works that way quite as much with overseas draft players, but, having draft rights is big time, and you can use, all of that as assets too, with a team that doesn't have too many draft picks to have, and, sweeteners and whatnot too, if he ends up panning out and they don't have any use for him too. So, but I did want to highlight just the human part of this. That was really cool, is seeing that he was in the green room. And that He went to go up and shake Mark Tatum's hand and did that interview after, called his parents in Italy. I thought that was really cool to see. And, I mean, to stick around and to be picked, to make the trip and actually hear your name called, that's got to be an unbelievable experience, and I'm really happy for him.
And my guess, I have not been told this, but my guess would be that he had a promise from the Cavs that he was going to be picked. Because I don't think that you come over, that you go to the green room, that you do all that unless you have some pretty strong assurances that you're going to be selected in the draft. Because being there and being undrafted, I don't think is something that anybody would want to go through. And of course, the draft and stash aspect of this too is important from a roster building standpoint. Because Spencer, this is a team that with where they're at financially, and they did this for the vast majority of last year. I don't know the exact date where they signed Chuma Okeke, but it was very late in the season. So what did the Cavs do? They spent most of the year with 14 guys on the roster. There was a little bit of a stretch where they had 13 guys on the roster. And because of how much that 15th roster spot will actually cost them, I would imagine they're going to go through this season with 14 guys on the roster again. So using a second round pick on a guy that there is zero intention of having on the roster at any point this year is useful from a team building standpoint too.
Most definitely. I agree with you there. And it's something that when you're kind of handicapped by the second apron, you have to find ways to continue building your roster, to continue development, and to continue surrounding your core players with young talent. And this is just one of many ways to do it. And, it's nothing new. This is what NBA teams have been doing for years upon years now. And every once in a while, they work out. And with how global the game's gotten, with how development has been overseas, it's a global game, man. And you never know.
It absolutely is. And the Cavs, I think they did pretty well on draft night. But Spencer, I think you did okay tonight. You've had better, you've had worse. I think you did just fine. But where can everyone find your stuff?
Right in the middle. Courtside with Cavs on SI. It's a podcast me and Spencer German do. The Spencer Davies way. Courtside with Cavs. Courtside with Cavs on SI. Me and Spencer German. It's our podcast. We recorded our 38th episode today with Yossi Goslin of the Third Apron. A lot of great stuff you can learn from Yossi. We talked about the NBA CBA, Second Apron, the restrictions that come with it, what he thinks the Cavs are going to do with Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill, any sorts of moves that the Cavs could make. It didn't sound like he was very optimistic about the Cavs making any moves at all. So that was interesting. But you can go find that on our YouTube page at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI and si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. I also do NBA work for RG.org, NBA draft work for Babcock Hoops. And I write at a bunch of other places, work behind the scenes at a bunch of other places, and just trying to stay abreast of everything going on in basketball. That's the best way I can put it, including being on Locked On Cavaliers here with Mr. Danny Cunningham.
That's me, and thank you for making Locked On Cavaliers your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get out of here, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell. I'll be back next week talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.